So now with the plastic in place, you want to build this brace across the bottom. You'll notice in these other beds I have done, I put that brace in the middle board, and it was only the last one I built that I realized upon talking to my engineering friend that, well, no, it really needs to be in the bottom board because that's where all the weight is. Okay, so to build this brace, you're going to measure on the inside to the middle of that bottom board. For here, it happened to be 15 inches. At that place, I'm then going to bury the bolt. So these eye bolts, they're here technically 3/8 by 6, don't reach. But if you want an 8-inch, it's a lot more money and it's going to show. So I just used the 6-inch guys. And then I took a 1-inch drill bit and I went ahead and put some blue tape so I know how far to go in. I went ahead and that's my first hole. And then after that's completed, I come back and I add my 3/8 inch drill bit and I go all the way through. So there's plastic on the other side and it's easy for that drill bit to get caught up in the plastic. So watch for it as you're going and try to stop if it does catch. Now, once it's through that hole, you can go ahead and put your eye bolt in the hole and just kind of hammer it through, and that way you're actually not going to mess up the plastic. All right, so now the bolts are in place, both sides. You're going to need the 1/8 inch, what I call metal rope, but it's got a different term to it, stainless steel wire rope cable. And you don't need much, as you can see, but there's two ways to pull it together. So what I've done is I've purchased this crimping tool, and both of these together you can get on Amazon for about 45 bucks. Good for doing fences and that kind of stuff. And with that, then you just buy a couple of crimps for this 1/8. For a 1/8 crimp, you buy the crimps, you do the first end, you stretch it across, and you'll see the turnbuckle I'm using is open-ended. That's the better one to use, otherwise you're going to have to do yet another connection on the other side. So with the turnbuckle, you don't need one quite this big, but that's what was available. I'm going to leave that open about 2 inches, right? And then I put this in place loosely. I crimp this guy as well. I cut off the excess, and then I measure, right? So these are 44 1/4 inches at the far end. So when I came in here, this was more like 44 1/2, 44 3/4. So I tighten this up until I get to whatever I want, and I'm done. I don't have to worry ever again. So if you don't want to spend the money on the special crimping tools, there's another way, and that is to purchase these gizmos. These are stainless steel wire rope cable clips for 1/8 inch stainless rope, and you can get those fairly cheaply on Amazon as well. They're just fussy. You've got to use, when you attach them, instead of the crimp, you're going to put 2 of those guys, and then you have to, fuss with them to get them on. Okay, so that's how you do the brace. So the brace, once done, allows you to then fill it up. You can cover your wire with duct tape, which is what I tend to do. Although, if you need to go in and fix something, you're going to replace it all anyway, so I'm not certain that's needed. At the end, you're going to see these 3 boards. They're just sitting here ready to go. Again, you're going to sort of get your level, see if you can make that straight. Make sure this comes up. And then when you put these in, you're going to see I've done these at an angle. And the reason is, inevitably, you're going to run into these bolts when you attach it. So make these offset from what you did on that side. Okay, now let's move along. This other one, I'm just about done. So first thing I did was I took my 7-foot boards that go from here to here. I laid it out. So this is a 12-foot bed, but at the end of that 6 feet, I have the overhang. So I need a 7-foot board. I come in here, I find my midpoint on my post. I measure 1 inch. So I have 1 inch overhang on the inside and quite a bit more on the outside. And I'll put in 1 screw. And then I come down here and I measure 1 inch and I put this other one in. Now, to measure to make your cut, you're going to make the 4 main boards on a 45-degree miter saw. So when you're cutting those, what I do is looking at this one over here. I find my corner, which is going from here across here and then out. And the way I measure that is I put this in place, and then I measure an inch in and I mark it, right? And then I go to my chop saw and I just cut a 45. Okay, so I have 4 45 cuts. I've sanded these a little bit. I've had to put in shims on this one because it's that bad size board, so you may have to do that, but it doesn't really matter. You can always just stick them on and sand them down. All right, I've got the 4 boards in place. The trick is, don't cut your final board on a 45 because they're not really 45s. Even though I've squared this whole thing up to the 1/4 inch, it doesn't matter. You know, with the ground underneath, you'll never get it exactly right. So what you'll do is you put the board down, and I'm going to sit a little bit proud of my corner on both these sides. I take a pencil and I scribe on the inside, and you can get in all the way across. And there's my line. Now when I cut this, I'm going to cut so that I leave the line, and I leave the line on both sides for a reason. If I screw it up and I cut right on the line, I have a little extra, right? Because I'm sitting proud here. And so basically what happens is I can kind of shoot this in and it'll still fit. Now, if you don't do it exactly right and you end up with that kind of a overhang once this is in place and cut, just sand off the corner. Nobody's gonna notice. Okay, so once you've got that in place, then as you've seen down here, you're just gonna screw them in. You're gonna see that these screws are not sort of exactly symmetrical, and the reason is I want a screw to hit the 4x4 posts, and then on this side I want it to hit my 2x6, right? So these screws are going to be 1 3/4 inches in, and if you want, you can measure it, but again, you'll get used to it after a while. There you have it, the best raised beds I ever could make.